and welcome to my first video of the new year. I'm starting off with looking back at 2018 though. I am going to go through all the books I read in 2018. I'm gonna have to pick up the pace. I have a lot of books to get through. I'm just going to go through and say what rating I gave to each of them and one good thing about them, because while there were some books that I didn't like this year, I still want to focus on the positive. First off, I just want to go through the Goodreads statistics real quick. In 2018, I read 29,428 pages across 82 books, which is so insane. I added like 10,000 more than what I read last year pages-wise, which is just so amazing. Les Mis, which was my longest book of 1,463 pages. I think that'll be the longest book I ever read in my life. I'm just gonna jump right in and get through these 82 books that I read in 2018. First, I started off the year with the sequel to Outlander, which is Dragonfly and Amber by Diana Gabaldon. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. I have endless good things to say about this book. I really loved the emotional turn that this book took. Next, I read Just Don't Fall by Josh Sundquist, which was actually a reread, and I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. I loved it the first time, and I loved it this time. Next, I read We Should Hang Out by Josh Sundquist. That was a 5 out of 5 stars. So fun and so funny. Next, continuing the Josh Sundquist marathon, I read Love at First Sight. I also gave a 5 out of 5 stars. I thought it was a beautifully written story. Next, I read Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda, which I ended up giving a 4 out of 5 stars. I thought it was a beautifully moving story. Next, I did a reread of Kingdom Keepers Disney at Dawn by Ridley Pearson, a 5 out of 5 stars, and I just love the way that these books bring Disney magic to life. Next, I read A Wrinkle in Time by Madeline L'Engle. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars, and I just loved the whimsical writing of this story. I listened to a Doctor Who audio drama, which was called Death's Deal, and I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars, and I just really loved that Catherine Tate read the audiobook. Next, I read the third Kingdom Keepers book, which is Disney in Shadow by Ridley Pearson, and I gave that a 5 out of 5 stars, and again, I just love the way that these books bring Disney magic to life. I read Unfiltered by Lily Collins, and I gave that one a 5 out of 5 stars. I loved that I learned so much from this book, and I really connected with her. Next, I listened to the audiobook of Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe by Benjamin Alire Sainz. I gave this one a 5 out of 5 stars, and it has become my favorite contemporary of all time. I finished Zenith by Sasha Ellsberg and Lindsay Cummings, which I gave a 5 out of 5 stars. The thing I loved most about this one is it really got me more interested into sci-fi. Next, I read Ready Player One by Ernest Cline, which I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. What I love most about this one is all the really fun pop culture references. Next, I read Carry On by Rainbow Rowell, and I gave that one a 5 out of 5 stars because it's so good and I cannot wait for the sequel. It was one of the most unique love stories I've probably ever read. Next, I read Autobiography by Christina Lauren. I gave this one a 5 out of 5 stars as well. I thought it was so interesting to see this love story develop in that context. I read The Inexplicable Logic of My Life by Benjamin Alire Sainz. I wanted to read his other book after reading Aristotle and Dante. I gave this one a 5 out of 5 stars as well. This one was another beautifully emotional story. Then I read my first book by Carrie Hope Fletcher, and I read On the Other Side, and I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars. It was just such a magical story, and it was a really beautiful love story as well. Next, I did a reread of Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, which I ended up giving a 5 out of 5 stars. Again, it is one of my favorite classics of all time. I love the science in it. Next, I read the trilogy by Jenny Han, To All the Boys I Loved Before, P.S. I Still Love You, and Always and Forever Laura Jean. Respectively, I gave them a 3, 4, and 5 stars. Overall, I love these books. Really connected with Laura Jean. Next, I read Eliza and Her Monsters by Francesca Zappia, which I gave a 3 out of 5 stars, but it just wasn't for me. I will say though, the illustrations within the book are really beautiful. I read Paris for One and Other Stories by Jojo Moyes, which I gave a 3 out of 5 stars. I loved that first story that takes place in Paris. Next, I read The Start of Me and You by Emery Lord, which frankly I barely remember the plot of, but I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. Handled sort of the world of grief and of losing someone really, really well. I read That Inevitable Victorian Thing by E.K. Johnston, which I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. Did have a lot of really good LGBT representation. It just was not a book for me. Next, I read Emergency Contact by Mary H.K. Choi, which I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. I thought it was a really fun contemporary. I read Love, Hate, and Other Filters by Samira Ahmed, and I gave that a 4 out of 5 stars. I thought it was a really interesting cultural view into this world. Next, I read Grave Mercy by Robin Lefevre. I gave that a 5 out of 5 stars. I thought it was a really, really fun historical fantasy, and all of the girls were like super badass. Next, I listened to Talking as Fast as I Can by Lauren Graham, and I gave that a 5 out of 5 stars. I love Gilmore Girls. Look, I even have a Gilmore Girls shirt on today. I listened to Scrappy Little Nobody by Anna Kendrick, and I gave that a 5 out of 5 stars as well. She is hilarious in this audiobook. Next, I read Alex and Eliza by Melissa De La Cruz, which I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. I ended up enjoying this book a lot more than I thought I would. I truly really loved seeing this romance bloom between Eliza and Hamilton. Next, I finished Les Mis by Victor Hugo. I actually started this book in like February, I want to say, and finished it in May. I had just been like slowly taking it piece by piece, but I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. While it is a long book and Victor Hugo is the king of going on random tangents, I did really, really enjoy these characters and this story. Next, I read The Geography of You and Me by Jennifer E. Smith, which I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. I think it's so unique how a lot of her books take place within such a short amount of time. I read The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, which I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. It was so disturbing to read, but I think that is why it's so important to read and why I actually enjoyed it so much. Then I read You Know Me Well by Nina LaCour and David Leviathan. I listened to the audiobook and I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. It was a very good book for LGBTQ representation. Next, I read Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard, which is one of my favorite fantasy books of the year. Next, I read Dumplin' by Julie Murphy, which was such a beautiful story. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. Next, I read The Wicked Deep by Shay Earnshaw, and I gave that a 5 out of 5 stars, and it was one of the most atmospheric books I've ever read. Then I read the graphic novel of Sherlock: A Study in Pink, and I gave that a 5 out of 5 stars. Sherlock is one of my favorite series, so I really, really enjoyed this. I followed that up with the Blind Banker graphic novel of the second episode of Sherlock, and I really, really enjoyed that one too. Then another graphic novel I read was My Friend Dahmer by Durf Bachter. This one, while highly, highly disturbing, I really enjoyed. I just thought this diving into the past of Infamous Name, it was really, really interesting, and I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. I read Mer by Joelle Selner, which is another graphic novel. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. The idea of having a graphic novel about mermaids. Next, I read A Fire and Stars by Audrey Colhurst, and I gave that one a 5 out of 5 stars. The main relationship that is created throughout this plot is just so absolutely beautiful, and I cannot wait for the sequel to come out this year. Next, I read Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi, and I gave that a 5 out of 5 stars. I loved most about this series is the very unique magic system they have. I read The Glass Spare by Lauren DiStefano, but I gave that one a 5 out of 5 stars. It was a very unique story. Next, I read We Are the Ants by Sean David Hutchinson, and I gave that one a 2 out of 5 stars. The concept of a character who gets abducted by aliens all the time is really fun. Next, I read This Is Where It Ends. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. It handled the topic of school shootings pretty well. Next, I read Ereshkigal: The End of Time by Roshani Chokshi, and I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. Eru is an amazing character. I read When Dimple Met Rishi. I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. It was an adorable romance. It had one of the best consent scenes I've ever seen in a book. So I read the graphic novel The End of the Effing World by Charles Forsman, which I gave a 2 out of 5 stars. The concept, though, was very interesting. Then I listened to the audiobook of Not If I Save You First by Allie Carter, which I gave a 5 out of 5 stars. She's one of my favorite authors, and I just really, really enjoyed the excitement of this one. Then I read Love and War by Melissa De La Cruz, gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I really loved seeing this romance continue to develop in the sequel. I listened to the audiobook The Haiti Game by Sally Thorne and I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. I thought it was so funny and just so cute. I read Daughter of a Burning City by Amanda Foody and I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. It was a perfectly atmospheric book. Then I read This Savage Song by Victoria Schwab, which I gave a 5 out of 5 stars. The system of monsters and how this world works was so interesting. Then I listened to the audiobook The Witch Hunter by Virginia Bowicker. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. My favorite part of this story was definitely the main character. She was super awesome. I listened to the audiobook Night by Ellie Weasel and I gave that one a 5 out of 5 stars. It was definitely a very sad story, but it was one that I think so many people need to read. Then I read Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen, which I gave a 5 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed the sister relationship in this story. Then I listened to the audiobook The Astonishing Color of After by Emily X.R. Pan. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. It tackled grief and mental health so well. Then I read Brunette Ambition by Leah Michelle and I gave that one a 5 out of 5 stars. My favorite part was definitely all the super awesome like beauty tips. Next one is a picture book that I sort of added onto Goodreads as a joke, but it's technically part of 82 books. I read Don't Eat the Teacher by Nick Ward. Then I listened to the audiobook Kikarella by Ashley Poston. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. Did really enjoy the romance in the story. I read the poetry book Honeybee by Trista Matier and I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. She had a lot of beautiful poems in there. Next I read Passenger by Alexander Bracken, which I gave a 5 out of 5 stars. This is probably my favorite book of the year. I think the time travel and the way it was portrayed in this book was so good. Next, I reread Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. My favorite part is still Mr. Darcy. Next, I read Stalking Jack the Ripper by Carrie Maniscalco and I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. My favorite part though was the science of it. I did a reread of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. Found a lot of new things that I think I had forgotten and I just really enjoyed that. I read City of Ghosts by Victoria Schwab. I really enjoyed the main character of this. I read the original Mary Poppins by P.L. Travers and gave that a 4 out of 5 stars. I thought it was really fun. Next, I read The Little Prince and I gave that a 5 out of 5 stars. I think I could read that one many times over and still be learning new things from it. I read The Star-Touched Queen by Roshani Chokshi and I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed the characters and the romance and there were so many twists and turns. I read The Mother-Daughter Book Club by Heather Vogel Frederick and I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. It was a fun little book to listen to on the drive. Next, I listened to Mansfield Park by Jane Austen and I gave this one a 3 out of 5 stars. Next, I read Shatter Me by Tahira Mafi and I gave that one a 5 out of 5 stars. Story and the world were just so fascinating and so exciting. And I think my favorite part was the ending. Then I listened to the audiobook Becoming by Michelle Obama and I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. It was just such an inspiration to hear her whole story. Then I read An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir, which I gave a 5 out of 5 stars. It was a really fun, epic fantasy. Next, I read Queen of Air and Darkness by Cassandra Clare, which I gave a 5 out of 5 stars. So much happened in this book. So many ends were tied up, yet so much was left open, and I really loved the ending, and then the epilogue like destroyed me, so can't wait for the sequel series. I listened to the audiobook Emma by Jane Austen. I listened to the Audible original drama of it, and I gave that one a 4 out of 5 stars. I thought it was so much fun. I listened to another audiobook. I listened to Whiskey in a Teacup by Reese Witherspoon, and I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I got to know Reese a lot better, and I just love her so much more now. Lastly, my last read of the year was Daughter of the Pirate King by Trisha Levenseller, which I gave a 3 out of 5 stars. The main character, Alosa, was a total badass, so cool, and I loved her. Those are the 82 books I read this year. I completed my challenge of 80 books, which I'm so happy about. I read a lot of really amazing books. I had a few misses, but that's okay. Overall, it was a fantastic year for reading. Let's get on to 2019. My goal is 80 books again. I think I can do it. We'll see. My goal this year is to read all the books that I own, stop buying new books, and stop renting new books. Just read the stuff that I own, and I'm so excited. I hope you enjoyed that very long list of books. Thank you for watching. I upload every Sunday. Like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye.